welcome this guy in. He's an award-winning writer-director. I'm such a fan of what he's done. Let me just throw a couple of titles at you before I bring him on. I mean, this guy's amazing. Well, you know the Hunger Games and you know Captain Phillips, okay? That's very high profile. But you will also know these other things. Shattered Glass was terrific. Breach was one of my favorites, about the FBI guy who's spying for the Russians. It's this tight drama. I recommend that you stream it. All of these things are great. But, take a true story and do something with it is really, he did did you see Richard Jewell, it was called? Terrific. Again, real life. And you have to tell that story and you have to make it cinematically dynamic. And he does that. Terminator, Dark Fate, he co-produced that. And I loved an Amazon offering called The Last Tycoon, which was really terrific. And I think there was a change at Amazon, and it didn't continue as long as I wanted it to. And then finally, The Comey Rule. The Comey Rule is Trump, his interaction with Comey, and it is brilliant. And it's directed brilliantly, and it was I think it was a couple of episodes, or maybe maybe there were more than two. But anyway, you can tell I'm a fan. He's also a political activist of sorts. So anyway, without any further delay, I've delayed enough, but you can tell I've lavished him with praise because he deserves it. Billy Ray, everybody. Come on.
Good to see you, Mark.
Billy. Yeah, good to see you, pal. Always.
How you doing?
I'm well. How many episodes was the Comey Rule? Was it two or was it?
2 nights.
2 nights, yeah. It was really, really great.
Thank you.
I'm just noticing that you really are drawn to real life in some of your writing. It seems increasingly.
Yeah, I feel like less of a fraud when I'm telling true stories, which is a good feeling. And then I found that since the election of Trump, it's just sort of intolerable to me to write things that don't in some way reflect America back to itself. That has just sort of bled into everything I've done since 2016, and I can't imagine it changing.
I also think the power of the media, and I consider you the media because I think just the same way we exported American culture through movies with Westerns and, with the shoot 'em ups and all the rest, I think to some degree we export ideas and different notions about things, and it can be done subtly or it can be done heavy-handedly, of course, but it can be done elegantly in the way that you write as well. I'm talking about to an American population.
Thank you. I mean, I really appreciate that. Picasso once said, art is a lie that tells us the truth. When you're telling a story that actually happened, whether it's Captain Phillips or Richard Jewell or Shattered Glass or Breach or the Comey Rule, then you get a step inside that, which is attempting to use the medium, whether it's a feature or streaming or a pay service, whatever it may be, but use that medium so that people will understand how something happened, the why behind it. If you were to ask the average American what happened on Apollo 13, their brain just immediately goes to Ron Howard's movie. Can't help it. And if someone said, hey, who were Woodward and Bernstein? You just go right to All the President's Men. Movies have that kind of power. So if you can harness it to tell the story of what really happened between Trump and James Comey, or what the FBI really did to Richard Jewell, why not? I think it makes us. I just think it makes us a better informed public, and entertainment, of course, is the way to do it.
Of course, that makes the point so well. I just wonder, though, the challenges, particularly, I was thinking about when I watched the Comey Rule, man, you've got a lot of stuff and a lot of characters to somehow condense into a narrative that has to be compelling enough to keep me. And in the case, as you've said, of 2 nights, and you did it. But I have to think that's a really daunting prospect when you start out.
Well, here's the way to think about it. Do you know how to do the sculpture of an elephant? You start with a block of granite, right? And you chip away everything that's not an elephant. Okay, that's the only way to do it. You can't build the elephant, right? It's the only way to go. Okay, so when you're telling a true story, it's the same thing. You research everything. You read everything you can get your hands on. You interview everybody who was there, with the exception of Donald Trump, who didn't want to.
You did talk to Comey, I know.
Spent a lot of time with Comey and all the people who were around Comey and people who were not fans of Comey's, because you got to get perspective on everything.
And
But
as I recall, Billy Ray, you were not a fan of Comey when you started out on this project necessarily.
no,
I don't know.
not initially, and that's a separate story, which I'll tell you in a second after I make
Okay,
this
go
point.
ahead. Sorry. Yeah.
Hey, it's okay. The idea is all that research you do, that's your block of granite. And then you step back and you say, okay, where's the elephant in there? In other words, what's the story that I'm telling? And I knew from the beginning that, at least in that case, in the same way that Richard Jewell was about speaking truth to power, and Shattered Glass was about what would happen if the least popular kid in high school had to take down the most popular kid in high school. The Comey Rule was about, it was a love story between a man and an institution. And everything he did was in defense of that institution, in this case, the FBI. And everything that wasn't that just got chipped away. So when you're done, all that's left is the story you're telling. It's the elephant. And that's how you have to, at least that's how I have to approach anything that I write. The thing that I'm working on right now, which is just about to be announced, actually, it's a series that I sold to Paramount Plus, which I'm pretty excited about, is about the U.S. Attorney's Office in the Southern District of New York. And that's another one of those just insanely research-driven pieces. This will be an ongoing series, but it's going to require, knowing, it's going to require a complete mastery of the subject, right? How do things actually work at SDNY?
And that's, to be honest, that seems like kind of a dry area. Like, you're going to have to find a way to make it sexy, for lack of a better.
Oh, it'll be super sexy, because the story that we're telling is about how SDNY deals with informants, which is a fraught relationship, and it's very, very dangerous and extremely compelling. This will be a breathless show for sure.
Now, quickly, let me double back to ask you about Comey, just because you touched on him.
Sure.
A lot of people say, and I think it's perfectly defensible, that the guy threw the election. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. I understand there are a lot of other elements, but, announcing we're reopening the investigation into Hillary Clinton. I mean, I know it because of the voracious appetite of the news cycle. It may seem like a long time ago, but it was a big moment. And he made that decision to go forward with that announcement. And it might have swayed that election. How did you? Well, go ahead.
It's funny. I wanted that job really badly. I really wanted to adapt that book, but I had to audition for him. I had to get his approval to be the screenwriter of it. So a call was set up, and it was me in Los Angeles and the producer in Los Angeles. Comey was in McLean, Virginia, 2 of his book agents in DC and 2 of his book agents in New York. And I was going to have to pitch him, sort of my take on his book over the phone, which was not my preference. This was pre-Zoom, pre-pandemic. It was just a good old-fashioned conference call. Anyway, so for the first 10 minutes, I'm just killing. Like, everything I'm saying, he's loving. It's a love story between a man and an institution, and everything he does is in defense of that institution. Like, it's all going great. And then one of his agents said to me, "How are you going to handle the Hillary stuff?" And I said, "Well, I think we have to take it head on. I mean, I don't want to write a movie about an unflawed character." And I said, dramatically, this is Frankenstein. You created the monster, and then the monster destroyed you. And Comey said to me, "How did I create the monster?" And I said, "Well, sir, you got him elected." And there was a pause. And he said, "Well, there were other factors." I said, "That may be, but you created about a 6-point swing, and that was enough."
Wow.
And he picked me anyway. I consider that to be a story about Comey, not about me. Because if I were Comey, I would not have picked Billy to write my story, knowing that Billy felt that way. But Comey did pick me because I had been honest with him. And I can tell you, in the 18 months that followed, where I was writing and then prepping and then shooting and then editing, in those 18 months, he had a million different opportunities to sway me, to sort of body English me into one position or another to make him look better. And it never happened once. There was never a moment of, "Hey, can you get rid of that one shot of Jeff Daniels? It really makes me look like an idiot." Or, "Can you get rid of that one line? Boy, I sound stupid there." Never, not once. That showed me who the guy was. That told me about his level of integrity. And of course, the more I learned about the story, and the more I learned about what the Russians were doing during that election, the more I realized that was what swayed the election for Trump.
Well, that's what you walk away with from that
Sure.
movie. I'll call it. There was 2 episodes. You walk away with just that the effect of the Russian influence was far greater, perhaps, than many of us understood at the time.
Oh yeah, but everyone in the FBI understood it.
The FBI it's odd because it does have a troubled history and also a virtuous history. It's really, when you see those guys with those FBI jackets show up, I usually get maybe it's just because I'm raised on cops and robbers kind of thing, I get a good feeling. But then you actually look at the history of the FBI, you see how it was weaponized in many, everything from, Martin Luther King to the Civil Rights movement, right?
Look,
in other words, yeah.
It's something that I think about a lot in terms of what kind of projects I want to write. To me, the idea is this: the FBI, like the Southern District of New York or the NFL, is not an institution. It is a group of people who are stewards of an institution. And those people can have good judgment or bad judgment. They can have good motives or bad motives. But the building doesn't make decisions. The people inside that building do. So the Department of Justice, run by Bill Barr, is a very different animal than the Department of Justice run by someone who actually believes in the mission. The post office run by Louis DeJoy is a very different animal than the post office run by people who think everyone should get their mail. It's the people that are inside those institutions that are guiding those institutions. And that's the story that I keep wanting to tell, whether it's the New Republic magazine or any other institution.
Sure.
What I find is, and this is what I was trying to celebrate in the Comey Rule, and will certainly be celebrating in this series about SDNY, is that there is a group of Americans that Donald Trump cruelly and inaccurately labeled the deep state. And in fact, those Americans are just public servants who care deeply about our democracy and care deeply about the apolitical intentions of the institutions that are there to protect that democracy. That's what I was making that miniseries about. That's what this series is going to be about. It's something I just believe to my core because I've met so many of those public servants, and I see how they turn down 10 times the money in the private sector because they want to work at the FBI or they want to work for the U.S. Attorney's Office. They want to put bad guys away. I find that to be enormously moving and very, very American.
I hadn't even thought that we'd get off this way, but I'm really glad we did, because the questions as to the Justice Department and the weaponization of the Justice Department and that whole investigation, if you will, that's being weaponized, right? Skipping over the actual weaponization of the Justice Department from the last administration to the supposed weaponization in this administration. I have friends. I grew up in Washington, D.C., so I have a lot of friends who work in government. I have friends at Justice who tell me during that last administration with the last President Trump, there were guys there who had really very little legal background. They were there to make sure that there were no political ties to the White House in any investigations that were going on at Justice.
Well, sure. And it's a miracle that we survived the 4 years there, but we did. The Constitution, for all of its flaws and for all the things that it didn't address, and they are legendary, set up a system of government that is unlike any in the history of the world. And the greatest stress test it could ever face, the Civil War, it faced it and it survived, it endured. The second greatest test it could face was Trump, and it survived that and endured, definitely took some blows. And we're still recovering from that in terms of norms. But if you want to talk about the weaponization of government, the United States Congress sticking its nose into the affairs of the New York City DA's office, where it has like zero jurisdiction, absolutely no right to question the Manhattan DA about anything that he may choose to do in terms of investigating a private citizen, which is all Donald Trump is now. As an ex-president, he has the same status I do. He's just a citizen. He's a citizen with Secret Service protection, but he's just a citizen. For the United States government to investigate something in which Congress has no role. That's about as much weaponizing of government as is humanly possible. And the fact that they have no sense of the impropriety of that should tell you what you need to know about Jim Jordan and Kevin McCarthy and Elise Stefanik and the rest of them. They'll all get theirs, I have no doubt. I think in 2024, you're going to see a massive blue wave in the House, because I think Americans are going to say, okay, Republicans had power in the House for 2 years. What'd they do? Well, they investigated Alvin Bragg and they investigated Anthony Fauci, and they're probably going to investigate Hunter Biden and Joe Biden, or try to impeach him, or they'll investigate Pelosi. What's that got to do with the price of rice?
Right.
Nothing. And I think they're going to pay for it. I really do.
That message is an easy one to get out, it seems. It's a question of, of getting it out. I understand we're siloed too, in this culture with, I feel as though those investigations and some of those characters to which you've just referred, they end up essentially auditioning for Fox News that night. It's almost seamless between the hearings to the TV studio, and so as long as you can,
because of the release of those texts from Tucker and Hannity,
in the Dominion,
and
case,
all the rest. The last poll I saw, 21% of Fox viewers believed in Fox News less than they did the previous month. 21% is a pretty big hit.
Yeah.
I mean, look, ultimately, 30% of this country is crazy. And 30% of this country has always been crazy. If you go back and look at what Americans were saying prior to the Civil War, about 30% of the country was nuts. Prior to the Second World War, about 30% of the country was into the America First movement and thinking that the Nazis weren't that big a deal. The day that Richard Nixon left office, his approval was at 29. Trump is right now hovering around 31. It's the same people. Yeah. They can't be moved. They seem like a more organized bloc than they ever did before, because they now have the internet on which to find one another. And yeah, that's a significant factor. But if 30% of this country is crazy and just unmovable, that means 70% of the country is not. And that's a lot of people. That's a lot of people you can reach and a lot of people you can sway.
And increasingly it is about those independents. Yeah.
And a lot of people who can come to the light. And I believe that's what is happening. And I believe that process is unstoppable, because ultimately the alternative is so unappealing. I mean, take a listen to what Donald Trump's talking about now. That guy's not exciting anybody. None of the mojo he had in 2016 is working for him now. And the people behind him, Lauren Boebert, Marjorie Taylor Greene, Matt Gaetz, George Santos, Jim Jordan, I just don't see them bringing any independence over the line. So I think they're going to pay a huge price in 2 years. I do.
It's a clinging to power, and I get it. That's what they're doing. But the grim realities of what control has brought this country, I'm talking about taking away a woman's right to choose. I'm talking about these really draconian legislative moves on the part of an activist Supreme Court, and now, as you say, a GOP in charge. It's scary. I want to ask you a question off politics and onto writing. I mean, really, you're, I'm a fan personally and professionally, but I just think your writing is so elegant, so brilliant, and you had to bring in all of these various disparate elements and tell a story in all these ways that we talked about. And now, and this is part of the labor negotiations with the WGA, I think, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. You have this AI, and AI is actually being used to generate any number of synopses about story ideas and even cranking out scripts. I wonder if you can just give me your take on the way that technology is going to affect your world.
I wish I had something brilliant to tell you about it. And I'm sure AI would have something brilliant to tell you about it. I don't know. I like to think that I'm not a machine, although I work like one. I really do try to pretend that I'm a mechanic and not an artist, and that I just get up in the morning and I get under the hood and I fix things. I do think 95% of screenwriting is problem solving, And maybe there's a way that AI can problem solve effectively. But then there's that other 5%. There's that 5% of writing that has to do with, can you invent characters? Can you create magic? Can you write dialogue? Do you have a soul? I can't imagine AI can replace that. If it can, well, then I guess a bunch of us are going to be fucked. I don't have a more eloquent answer than that. And look, I know that Americans are famous for their arrogance in looking towards the future. And by that, I mean, there was a point in 1910, 1912, somewhere around there, I forget the exact date, Congress was going to shut down the U.S. Patent Office because everything had been invented, right? There was a phone, there was a light bulb, there was a car, and everyone said, well, that's it. Like, what else is there? And they literally were going to shut the patent office down. So I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the guy who says, no, this can never happen. It's hard for me to picture, very hard for me to embrace. And at this point, it's got nothing to do with me. So I'm just going to keep pretending I'm a mechanic. I'm going to spend my days under the hood, problem solving, and hoping that that extra 5% that can't be taught is going to be something that differentiates me from some sort of machine.
And you know something? That extra 5% actually separates a good movie or a good series from just a
inside every great movie is a terrible movie trying to get out, right?
Right.
Like, I mean, you can make Jaws or you can make Anaconda. They're not that different, but one is just executed at the highest level possible and the other is not. And humans made those choices. Humans executed those decisions, and that's why that movie's an all-timer.
Indeed. Carl's been on the show several times, actually. He's a great writer.
Well, Carl has that famous line, it's always Jaws week somewhere.
I've never heard that line. It's applause-worthy, that line. Hey, Billy Ray, we'll watch for this project, I guess, next. And
yes.
You'll, when you are ready to pull it out of the oven and serve it, you'll let us know. We'll give it some love. I
would love to do that. It's such a pleasure to talk to you. It's so good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, you too, pal. Really great. The great Billy Ray, everybody. Thanks, Billy.
I don't know about that, but thank you.
Yeah, you really are terrific. Thanks a lot, man. Yeah. Hi, it's Mark, and I thought that was great. Hit the notification bell. You'll know whenever there's a new video being dropped, and please subscribe to our channel to help us save the universe.